looking at the other letters within this, again, we have OESO.
Scusi.
Me, scusi.
This is starting to feel like
This
is starting to feel like an exam.
I know, dude, right?
Am I studying for something right now?
Yeah, you do not pass go. You do not collect $200.
It's like
Seriously.
OBSK, OB what? Like, I'm like, what? Wait, K means what? What? OQ?
Boy band's killing me.
I'm getting anxiety. All of a sudden I feel like I'm back in college. Yo, welcome into the show. I am Ryan O'Leary.
And I'm Mike Zico.
And this is the Bourbon Playbook. Just another
podcast in the basement.
What's up, Zika? What's up, my man?
Let's go. What's good, man?
You got some sexy stubble.
I do.
Looks good. I like the look. Looks a lot sexier than the last time I saw you when you were out taking your Christmas lights down with the... that wasn't a Fu Manchu, was it?
It was a handlebar.
It was a handlebar. Boy, that was aggressive. And the wife let you keep that for days, but it's now gone. I was wondering if you were still going to have it.
Yeah, no, I had to disregard it pretty quick. We had a event at the pub this past weekend. Me and my cousin Josh were working, and I immediately woke up on Friday morning. I texted him like, "Hey man, let's rock some Fu Manchus or handlebar mustaches." And he's like, "Let's do it." It was a hockey event, so we had to wear hockey unis for Shakopee. So we rep those, and then, what goes better with a hockey uni than a handlebar mustache, right? So
yeah, and you let the hair down too, I saw.
Let the hair down. It was ridiculous, man. Yeah.
Yeah, you look cleaned up now.
Yeah.
Not so much when I saw you taking the Christmas lights down.
It was dirty.
Yeah, down and dirty. I'm going to pour one out for the Bud Man.
The Bud Man. I've heard so many good things. I've actually seen him in your driveway ripping cigs one morning. Like
No.
No.
That wasn't the Bud Man.
No.
That was George, my stepfather.
George.
That's George. Was he wearing the leather coat?
Yeah. Actually, my wife woke up and she's like, is there a stranger in Ryan and Katie's driveway? I'm like, yeah, I think he's ripping heaters.
Yeah, the only thing the Bud Man rips is IPAs, not the heaters. That was George.
George.
Good old George.
Yeah.
The Bud Man's a unicorn. Kind of a unicorn on the pod. We've mentioned him quite a bit. I haven't really gone into detail, told a lot of stories about my dad. I'm going to tell a few. Why am I pouring one out for the Bud Man? It's because in true Tom Brady fashion, the Bud Man has come out of retirement. He's gone back to work.
No way.
Yeah.
All right.
So he worked for his company. He works actually for a defense company. It's called BAE Systems.
Yeah.
Military defense. And he was there for like 40 years before he retired. And he's now back. And just like the idea of retirement, right? Like, we're both too young to kind of be at that part of our lives. But I can imagine that's a tough thing, right? Like,
yeah.
First of all, I can just hope that when I get to that point in life, like, I've made enough good decisions to like plan properly, take care of my kid. Me and my wife can like go and enjoy it. Like, we'll be in the fourth quarter of our lives at that point, right? Hitting 65, whatever it is.
Yeah, same.
And it's like, I hope that we can have the means to take care of the people we got to take care of and like go do shit that we haven't been able to do because we're working and dealing with family and stuff all the time, right? But my dad, for the Bud Man, it was always about the number 62, right? He was always talking about retiring at 62. It had nothing to do with finances. Like, he had no financial plan. It was just, when I'm 62, I'm going to retire because I'm sick of working, right? And that was his thing. And sure enough, like, right after his 62nd birthday, I think like a couple months later, we were at his retirement party at a bar. Like, that was it.
Yeah.
He was done. And he did the thing, watched the birds, did some house projects.
Signed up for AARP.
Yeah. Walked the dog and just said, fuck this. I'm going back to work. I'm bored as hell, right? So I think he lasted like 2 years. So good for you, Bud Man. Good for you. Good for you for
Respect.
Like, get off the keister, go back to work if you're not feeling it. If you're bored, you feel like you have more to give and you're going to get some joy out of it. I appreciate him going back, and he actually started on Monday. So big cheers to the Bud Man. Let's clink it real quick. Cheers to the Bud Man. And while we're here, just a couple quick facts about the man himself. Some that you might know, Zika, but some that might be news to you.
Break it down.
This one you know. And I feel safe telling you and the listeners this because I don't think my dad's listening to the pod. I sent it to him and he said he was going to quote unquote binge it at some point. My dad doesn't binge anything except for an IPA. So he's not going to binge the podcast. Like, well, that's what he said. What do you think he means when I say, "Hey Dad, here's the podcast"? He goes, I'm going to wait till you have a few more episodes and I'm going to listen." What do you think he was really trying to say?
I'm going to go read the paper instead.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. He was like, "Fuck you and your bourbon podcast.
Yeah.
I drink beer." But he goes by Bud because his real name is Leslie.
Ooh,
This you know.
I do.
But so far, his greatest achievement in life was not naming me Leslie Frank O'Leary III. Okay, so that could have happened.
Hilarious.
He's a junior. I could have been a third. He didn't do that. I think that was his greatest achievement in life, not naming me Leslie Frank O'Leary III. Growing up in the 60s as a young boy named Leslie toughens you up. And it's probably why my dad ended up in the Air Force. That's fun fact number one. Fun fact number two, my dad calls women in general chickens. Chickens. That's
better than hens.
women are
right?
chickens. His wife, Marla, beautiful lady, is the chicken.
Really?
And that's, he actually will call her the chicken more than he will call her Marla. And she allows this and continues to be married to him. So if you know you found your person, that's my dad's person. She lets him call her the chicken.
That's hilarious.
which is unbelievable. And this is a thing for me coming up in life, trying to find my own life partner, introducing girlfriends to the family and trying to explain to them my dad was kind of raised by wolves and
his wife's a chicken.
he's going to call his wife the chicken in front of you and he might refer to you as a chicken and you're just going to have to like go along with it. And they're like, ha ha ha, that's funny. And then they realize that he's not joking. He's just talking normally. That's when like actual conversations happen later on. Like, do I want to really get involved with this guy and marry into this family? Right. Like, so shout out to Katie. She's not scared off by the Bud Man and him calling women the chicken, which is a real thing.
Can I ask if when you introduced Katie to him, did he call her a chicken initially?
I don't think like, it's not like he'd be like, "Yo, you're the chicken," but he'll just talk in general and it just comes out. Women are chickens. Like bunch of women at a table is a chicken coop. Like this is this is my dad. This is probably not appropriate. But this is the man that raised me.
That's super funny because it reminds me of my Uncle Steve, one of the wittiest guys I know. He always, if he sees a bunch of ladies talking in the corner, he'd be like, "Oh, look at the hens over there clucking,"
Yeah,
So
same type of deal.
I mean, it could be, maybe it's a generational thing,
That's on Amy's husband?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
All right. Fun fact number 3. My dad starts every conversation, and we could call him on the phone right now if he wasn't asleep, but he would answer with the word, "Yo." Okay.
Is that where you get it?
And that's why I start each episode with the word "yo." It's kind of my little ode to my dad. So if people were wondering why we say "yo, yo, yo," welcome to the show. Yo is definitely a Budman thing.
Yo, yo, yo.
And that brings me to just a quick memory that kind of sums him up perfectly. So in middle school, I could walk to school from home, right? It was right down the street. And 7th, 8th grade, I'm a little bit older than you, but you probably had this phase in your life too, where this was my hip hop phase.
Oh,
so it was Tupac, it was Jay-Z, DMX, Dr. Dre, Snoop. This is that's all I listened to, and I was obsessed. And it was back in the day where there was no Spotify, there was no, YouTube at this point in time. You actually had to go to the store and buy CDs, and you had physical CDs that you would put into your radio or Discman. It was Discman or whatever.
Discman.
Yeah, Discman. What was it called? And you actually had your CDs, and honestly, the CDs I wanted to listen to had the little parental advisory sticker on, and you had to have your parent with you to buy them. So you had to work the back channels. Later in life, you learn to do that for alcohol, but when you're in 7th and 8th grade, you're doing that for your music, and you collect these CDs. And I used to hide them in my room because I didn't want my dad to find them and hear DMX barking like a dog and rapping about killing people and take my music away. Right? I didn't want him to do that. So I hid my music. And I just remember walking home from school one day. It was like a random Friday afternoon, and I could hear like bass as I'm walking down the street. I'm like, that's weird. Someone's having a party. And then I get a little bit further along, and I'm like, okay, that's clearly like hip hop music. And then I like turn on my street, and I'm like, okay, that's clearly my music coming from my own house. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on here?
Yeah.
So I go around the house, into the backyard. There's my dad wearing tight blue jeans, no shirt. We had these tall Bose speakers in the house. He had moved one in the middle of the room in front of the screen door. So it's just blasting out. We lived on this dead end street, like 4 or 5 condominiums at the end of the street.
Okay.
And like a shared backyard. It's just booming into this backyard. He is half in the bag. It's 3 in the.
I was just gonna say 5 IPAs deep.
Yeah, he is painting a man-made like privacy fence he built on one side of our patio to like give the house some privacy, I guess. He had built this thing. I guess he was home from work, he was painting, and he is blasting profanity-laced rap music out the door. My music, and I'm like, what the fuck is happening? So I just go, Dad, what are you doing? And he just goes, yo, I love Jazzy. I love Jazzy. So that's
Jazzy.
That's honestly one of my favorite stories. My dad, like, he took my Jazzy CD and it was going crazy. So again, pour it out for the bud, man. No, you're not listening, Pops, you asshole. Proud of you for getting off the keister, getting back at it. You can only watch the birds for so long. If you're not finding your happiness in retirement, maybe you're not ready. So cheers to the bud, man.
Cheers, bud, man. This week, I'm going to pour it out to kind of just some maybe family, friends vibes. So I know we mentioned it earlier, but I definitely had a wardrobe change here on my face this past week.
You definitely had something on your face. Yeah. It was very, very dirty.
Yeah, it was more than a caterpillar for sure. Just crawling along.
I think I was walking my dog, and I was like, oh my God, almost walked up to you and put my hand on your shoulder. I'm like, are you okay? Is everything cool?
No, no, I'm not. It's like, look at me. But yeah, man. So kind of back to the story. I obviously know this Saturday was the big hockey turnout, right, for the high school teams at Valley Fair, and I knew I was working. They gave us jerseys ahead of time. Going back to the story, I texted my cousin Josh, who I work with at the pub, and Friday morning, I'm like, dude, I just woke up, had a great idea. Let's put on a mustache for the crew. Maybe get some extra tips. Let's just put on the full face, And
it's always fun when you're a bearded man. You can do some hilarious stuff. Like you can trim that thing into a lot of different things. If you want to, right? Like when you have like a nice full beard, you could do a lot of shit.
Exactly. So my cousin Josh is like 100% in, like on board. Let's do it. Mm-hmm. Then he sends me a picture of a hockey player from like the 80s. Couldn't tell you who it is, but it looked like he had the most physical Fu Manchu, as you would call it. I'd call it a handlebar mustache, but it was super thick. Mm-hmm. So, I'm immediately, I go to the bathroom and I'm like, I'm shaving up and I'm trying to clean myself. And I basically make this like pencil line, very thin handlebar mustache. It's humiliating. And then I look at the picture and I'm like, wow, this guy looks really physical and I look really metro. I'm like, I wonder how this is going to look. Right.
And did you run this by the wife at all, or just a unilateral decision?
Great question. And I did not. I ended up going downstairs and immediately Liz is like, hey, can we talk about, oh my God.
Poor Lizzie.
And she was just smiling ear to ear. It was priceless. And she's like, what did you do? And why is it so thin? I'm like, damn it. You noticed too?
You should have had her help you.
I should have. Mm-hmm. She was in meeting zone. I was kind of in between.
Well, what's more important?
The handlebar mustache. Yeah,
of course.
Hands down. Yeah. So we ended up rocking those. I showed up at the bar a little earlier than Josh did. And, I get there and immediately, smiles light up across the bar. And then my cousin comes in, a couple hours later and he's got a physical. It's like, and he had a longer beard than I did. And it's truly just like a perfect, you can grow mutt chops really thick, but picture that for a, handlebar mustache. Not only that, but he had like the grandpa glasses or like the old 80s glasses, the gold rimmed, big old what do you call them? Like bivocals or
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So he was playing the game.
yeah. Oh, he spiced it up, man. He definitely took it to another level. So I mean, we were ripping beers all night to different people all over the bar, and we're just having fun. A lot of the Shakopee guys are coming in, and I'm like, hey man, Shakopee class of '87, how you guys doing? And they're just loving it. We're getting some tips, having fun, and all of a sudden out of nowhere, I totally forgot my little sister's in town, Jess, and so Jay-Z comes to town with her best friend Danielle, and next thing you know, we're sitting at the bar. I mean, I'm working, but she's also there enjoying her time. We're catching up. I haven't seen her for a while, so it's always fun. And then my two other cousins come in, Jack and Joe, which are actually Josh's two brothers, come the Three Hooks, and they're polishing off some beers, and we're serving and having a good time catching up. So I mean, it was such a good time to see all my family on one side of the bar while my cousin and I are working. Right, we're just having the time of our lives. To put the icing on the cake, my uncle walks in with my aunt, who I haven't seen for, I don't know, months, maybe years. It's perfect because I just get off shift. And as soon as I get off shift, I mean, I naturally just go over to the table. We start shooting the shit and we catch up, man. We're telling like life stories, tempted to break out the euchre deck a little bit. We're in the back room. It's a little bit more intimate and more quiet. And man, I bet we sat there for 3 or 4 hours, just catching up, shooting the shit, man. And, little things like that, really make your weekend, especially when it's so busy with, life, work, podcast, pub, and then you get some time to catch up and just hang out with your family. It's truly something special. So
everybody just treated you completely normally. Your family, have other customers at the bar. What was it? Just people were just treating you like a normal dude back there with the handlebar. Maybe that's a look you should go for, full term.
It's funny. I left one part out of the story. So my uncle leaves.
Maybe on purpose.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So.
Oh, give it to us.
This is terrible. So my uncle leaves, and then my cousins are still there, right? So we pull up. We're watching. I think the T-Wolves game was over at that time. We're watching some ball game on the TV, and there was one spot, and it was right in between two very attractive females and my cousin Joe. And so I naturally just kind of squeeze in there, right? I'm like, hey, do you mind if I sit here? I got a head nod. I'm like, okay, whatever. So we're just casually talking in conversation with my cousins, I am. And within 30 seconds, these two chickens flock to the other side of the bar.
Yo!
And it was one of the most embarrassing things because my cousin's like, man, I've never seen girls get up and leave so quickly as soon as you bless them with your presence. And it was so true, man. And that's when I'm like, everything just kind of, the world slowly stopped. And I'm like, man, maybe I lost tips tonight wearing this stupid Fu Manchu, right?
Did you make less than you normally would in a night?
I did, like $100 less. It was terrible.
Dude, that's probably a thing. It's a nice brewery just to set the stage for people. It's a really like, what's the word? It's like you walk in there and it's like, there's a good ambiance in there. It feels like a fairly new building.
Yeah, it was. I mean, 2023. It was built.
Yeah. I was gonna say it's not an old building at all. It's really nice and
good acoustics, live bands.
Let's put it this way: it doesn't feel like a biker bar when you walk in there.
Not
right?
at all. Not at all.
It's typically a little bit of an older crowd, I'd say.
Yep.
But people put together, having a few beers, listening to live music, chatting, type deal. A couple restaurants right nearby. One's attached to the brewery. It's not a biker bar vibe. It's not a dive bar at all.
No.
So maybe just the Fu Manchu didn't fit. I don't know.
It wasn't my vibe. You know what? I should have just dressed up as a clown and I probably would have got more tips.
Yeah. I think your heart was in the right place. It was hilarious. It was great to see it in person and the photo of you and your cousin you sent me.
Yeah.
Excellent. You guys look great. You deserved more, man. You deserved the tips. How dare you people not tip Mike Zika?
Seriously.
This beautiful, beautiful man who decided to taint his face for literally put a taint on his face for one night.
For the love of the game, man.
Yeah.
Love of the game. So yeah, this week poured out to family and Fu Manchus.
It's a family and lost tips.
So bourbons of the week. I said bourbons plural. We got
another double.
Absolutely. So we're covering 4 Roses this week. Single barrel, OESO, 100 proof, MSRP around $50. This is the brand new release, by the way, with the red label. just hit shelves in Minnesota here this past week. And then the Four Roses single barrel strength, straight from the barrel, OESO, 110.2 proof. It's actually a store pick from Top 10 Liquors, MSRP around $110. So a lot of bourbon brands love a good like origin story, right? And I love digging into the history and trying to find it out and really trying to understand like who are the characters, what was the origin of this and how it came to fruition. So this one is a little interesting. It's kind of like a love story or a genius marketing strategy, to be honest. And we'll get into this, but according to legend, founder Paul Jones Jr. fell madly in love with this Southern Belle girl, right? And when he proposed, she gave him the ultimate level of suspense. And she said to him, "If I accept, I will wear a corsage of Four Roses to the ball," right? And we're talking 1800s, okay? Mm-hmm. So fast forward to the big night, cue the dramatic music. She literally walks in rocking 4 bright red roses. And Paul, apparently, obviously a man with commitment issues, came in and started to think to himself, wow, this is it. This is exactly what I'm going to name the brand of my distillery, Four Roses.
Named it after his girl.
Named it after his girl. Pretty romantic, right? But here's the kicker. There is zero historical proof that this ever happened. But if you go on Four Roses' website, that's still the marketing ploy to this day. So
it became a brand. It became, those roses that are kind of imprinted on the glass bottle when you buy a Four Roses bourbon. It all comes back to this story. You don't know this about me, Zika. I like a good chick flick.
Yeah?
So something that Katie really appreciates about me.
Okay.
I will sit there and watch the chick flick. I will watch, oh, you're going to make me watch The Bachelor? Fine. Bachelor in Paradise? Fine.
I roll. Yes.
Yes. Like, oh God, I don't. Okay. Now let's get
Fist pump.
Let's get into this thing. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm in. Hopefully there's more of this. Give me more romance.
Absolutely. Well, that's about it.
Oh, damn.
All right.
Okay. Back to reality. Back to bootlegging and medicinal whiskey. And
it totally is.
Perfect.
Let's dive into the history, shall we?
Love it.
Awesome. So this is kind of like the bourbon's rise, fall, and comeback. And I'll get into this in a second. But in 1888, you could say that was the beginning. The trademark Four Roses started slinging the bourbon in Louisville, Kentucky. So in the early 1900s, one of America's favorite pours at the time was Four Roses. And it became very popular across the U.S. as one of the smoothest whiskeys. And of course, what's going to happen next in 1920 through 1933, Ryan? What is it?
I mean, Prohibition, and this affected a lot of distillers.
It did.
They're not the only ones. There's a lot of bourbons that we've gone through so far here on episode 12 now. Prohibition was a problem for a lot of them.
Yeah. And in 1920 through 1933, of course, doctor's orders, when distilleries shut down, of course, Four Roses acquired a whiskey license. So, I mean, it's, again, kind of like getting a doctor's note for, literally just getting a prescription of bourbon, calling in sick to work and getting a legal bottle of whiskey instead of antibiotics.
Yeah.
That's crazy to think about.
So the whiskey license, the medicinal
license.
The medicinal license. Got you.
Exactly. And here's where kind of the tragedy set in, which is interesting. So 1950 through 2002, this is when the bourbon tragedy struck, right? So Seagram's bought Four Roses and did the unthinkable. And when I say Seagram's, yes, the Canadian whiskey trash, right?
Okay.
So they stopped selling this bourbon in the U.S. and actually turned it into a cheap blended whiskey. Meanwhile, the real Four Roses bourbon was only available in Japan and Europe. So while Americans are drinking like these subpar blends, people in Tokyo are actually enjoying like the really good stuff, right? So in 2002, this was kind of the ultimate comeback story, right? So the Japanese beverage giant, Kirin Brewery, they kind of swooped in and bought Four Roses, and immediately they restored it to 100% straight bourbon. They brought back the brand to the U.S., and obviously bourbon lovers just lost their mind because they're like, wow, my grandfather used to drink this and tell me these stories. And he's been drinking piss water since. and now he's got that good brown juice, right?
He's drinking the medicine during Prohibition. Crazy. Just people keep on buying the brand.
Yeah. So the nice thing is today, Four Roses is obviously one of the most respectable names in bourbon, right? So they obviously brought it back to the U.S. They have 10 killer unique recipes, awesome barrel picks, and a lot of award-winning limited edition bottles as well. So I do want to make sure that our listeners know that while it's owned by a Japanese company, Four Roses is still 100% made in Kentucky. Master distiller is currently Brett Elliott, and honestly, some of the best releases that we've ever seen, right? So
that's wild. I had no idea, though, that Four Roses was a Japanese owned. Like I had no idea.
Weird?
That's crazy.
Crazy to think about.
Yeah.
So it's like whether, Four Roses is still authentic Kentucky bourbon, yes, that's the answer, right? It just happens to have a global backer that helped save it from this mediocrity that it was in the U.S. for over 50 years, right?
So if you're owned by a Japanese company, can you still have like a bottled in bond? Like, do they have a batch that's bottled in bond?
Great question. And the answer is yes, they do. It's actually, their bottle and bond it's typically limited to more of a special release rather than their actual core lineup of bourbons. But this is going to be one that's a huge hitter, very expensive. I think MSRP on them are like $250 right now, but they're the nice, kind of the old classic Four Roses, not the square single barrels that we're drinking right now. But you'll see them, they'll say limited edition on them in cursive, and they have that oval shape like the classic small batch does. Good question.
Yeah, cool.
So let's dive into a little bit more on the specifics of this dram, shall we?
Oh, please.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, this new single barrel collection just hit the shelves. So all 4 have been released right now. So this is big news coming out of Four Roses, because if you're a fan of their flagship single barrels, which we're going to sample here in a little bit, they're now expanding that lineup. So OBSV just won the world's best single barrel bourbon, and now it's really kind of transitioning this new collection of inspiration throughout all these single barrels. So there's 4 new recipes rolling out here, each with a specific flavor profile within their kind of legendary 2 mash bill, 5 yeast strain recipe. So to kind of go over that lineup, the new single barrels here that are available in 2025, late 2024, and now in early 2025, all of them currently out. OBSV, that's going to be more rye, apricot, pear, cinnamon, toasted oak. OBSF, more herbal notes, bright rye, apple, vanilla, clove. OESK, baking spices, mellow oak, tea leaves, and caramel. And then OESO, which is what we're going to dive into here shortly. So it should be more the red fruit, vanilla, brown sugar, and oak. So that's kind of literally my jam. And both of these bottles will be that.
Are those acronyms? Like, where did they come up with that?
So let me dive into that.
Okay, you got that. Okay.
Kind of the secret blend behind these recipes is broken down into a specific formula. So 2 mash bills with 5 yeast strains. So 10 unique bourbons overall. And just to give you an example, Maker's Mark, they use 1 core recipe, whereas Four Roses uses 10 unique bourbon recipes. Okay. So very unique in that sense.
It's already a lot of work to distill 1 bourbon.
Right. And have it taste good.
Yeah. And age it and all that.
Could you imagine 10?
10 different recipes.
Yeah. Yeah. And
it's like a bourbon bakery.
Literally. And they're serving a lot of different kind of donuts.
I guess so.
Jelly filled, cream puffs.
I'm excited.
On.
Don't talk about donuts too much here.
I know.
Get me fired up.
Go for a Krispy Kreme. But anyway, so looking at the 2 mash bills. So this is where those acronyms come into play here. So the first one is mash bill B, 60% corn, 35% rye, 5% malted barley. So it's got a little bit of a higher rye for that spicier kick. And then mash bill E, which is going to be 75% corn, 20% rye, 5% malted barley, which is ultimately going to be a little bit more sweeter and smooth. And then looking at the other letters within this, again, we have OESO, Excuse me.
Excuse
Me, scusi.
This is starting to feel like
This
is starting to feel like an exam.
I know, dude, right?
Am I studying for something right now?
Yeah, you do not pass go. You do not collect $200.
It's like
seriously.
OBSKOB what? Like I'm like what? Wait, K means what? What? OQ.
This boy band's killing me.
I'm getting anxiety. I all of a sudden I feel like I'm back in college.
Oh, back to school to prove to Dad that I'm not a fool.
So there's a 4-step process behind this. So step number 1 is the mashing and fermentation. So they're going to cook that rye, corn, and malted barley, and then ultimately filter it with that limestone Kentucky water. You hear about that in a lot of different bourbons. Step number 2, they use a double distillation process. So they first put it in the column still and then in a pot still called a doubler for that extra smoothness. All right. So it's kind of a 2-stage process. Step 3 is that single story aging. Unlike most distilleries, Four Roses actually ages their barrels in a 1-story rickhouse at a consistent temperature. So it's typically that more smoother and balanced bourbon.
Okay. So having a double-story rickhouse changes the process.
Yeah. If you think about temperature, airflow, all the things that go into literally a warehouse, right? Or a storage facility.
Yeah.
You know, at the top, it's going to be hotter. At the bottom, it's going to be colder, right? So it's like, at what point do you move barrels around from the bottom to the top to like, especially when you're talking about like the Weller collection, right? And if it's something that's not good enough and it's already a 10-year, are you going to move it down? Or if it's really good, are you going to move it up, you know, to continue the aging process? So that's something that they do to just keep it very similar on those flavor profiles across the board.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah, and then finally is simply the bottling and blending. So some of these bottles are single barrels where others are actually blended with some of their best unique recipes, which is, again, 10 total.
A lot going on with these Four Roses.
Exactly. So again, you're going to be experiencing a lot of spicy, sweet, fruity, floral, and herbal flavors. If that's something that's for you, you got to check out Four Roses. They got 10 different recipes for you. I think they're all just a little bit different. For me, definitely a little bit ethanol heavy, but the characteristics and flavors are very different in general. So it's just a really fun experience to dive into them all.
Thank you for not bringing all 10 over.
Yeah, that would be a long night. We don't have enough caskets for you, Ryan.
Yeah, no. I would need multiple caskets. I would.
And I do have to shout out Ryan, Bourbon Buddy, hand delivered this today. And he's like, man, if you're going to get the single barrel OESO, what are the chances that you have an OESO barrel strength? And I was like, Ryan, that's a great idea. So here we are with a double dram episode. Thank you, Ryan. Kudos. And Josh for hooking me up with the bottle.
Thanks, boys. Ready to pop these open and see what they taste like.
All right. Here we go.
Let's get it.
Money.
Ooh, that's good.
So the first bottle that we're breaking open is going to be the Four Roses single barrel. So the OESO, that's going to be the 100 proof, the new bottle that just hit the shelves here in Minnesota. On the nose, Ryan, what are we thinking?
Definitely a little hot. This is a bottle we just opened.
Just open it. And yeah, if you dive in, remember, kind of take your time working down in the middle of the dram there, but you're going to get a big ethanol burn if you jump the gun.
Definitely a very sweet on the nose.
So I'm getting a lot of cherries and then like vanilla or honey.
Yeah, that's totally it. Sweet vanilla.
All right, let's check it out on the palate, eh?
Whew.
That's a spicy meatball.
It's a spicy one, my man.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not getting that sweetness right up front on the tongue that I'm looking for almost. And I don't know if it's just the bottle's so hot that I'm getting punched with that ethanol. But I was really looking for, it's so sweet on the nose. And I was looking for that really nice hit of sweetness when after the swish. Not quite hitting for me yet. I don't know about you. What are you getting right in the tip of your tongue? Are you getting sweetness?
I get like a very, very small amount of honey right on the tip of my tongue.
Is it almost more oak than sweet?
Correct. And I think for me, it's like it goes from honey, just a hair on the tongue. And then on the sides, I get a little bit of the cherry. And then in the back, it's moving towards, it's all spice. It almost tastes like a bunch of rye in the back or baking spices.
Yeah.
I am getting a little bit of honey and that sweet red fruit or cherry, but it's just a little bit on the front end, and the sweet cherry comes on the sides of my tongue. I think if you add a dash of water, open it up a little bit, that would be something that I'd recommend, just so you could taste that sweetness a little bit more on the front of your tongue. Because sometimes I feel like, and especially when I started drinking bourbon for the first time, especially with a really hot, high proof single barrel, it was so hot with ethanol, right? Like I couldn't even really conceptualize, like in my brain, like the notes of what I was tasting, because it was like uncomfortable, right?
Yep.
And this is like the third or fourth sip I've taken now, so I should be able, my palate kind of numbs up a little bit. And at this point, I feel like I should be tasting a little bit more red fruit that I love, that was on the nose, but it's so high ethanol. And again, love Four Roses. I think this is a fantastic bourbon. OESO is probably one of my favorites out of the line. I've had about 5 or 6 of them, but it always is it's so hot for me, right? And that's across the board. Outside of their small batch, maybe, even that has a little bit of heat to it that I just feel like that's my only qualm with Four Roses. It's always it hits a little bit hard, right? If you're not ready for it.
It's interesting to hear you say that it's not just like one experience with Four Roses for you. It's multiple where you're like, shit, this one is just, I got to put some water in this.
Right.
Yeah.
Just
or some ice. Yeah.
Which isn't a bad thing. And again, This is a fantastic bourbon. Front of the tongue, honey, kind of on the front to the right and left side of my tongue. I'm getting a little bit of that red fruit. And then it immediately moves to that baking spice, and then almost like a very creamy mouthfeel.
What did you say? What the fuck did you just say?
So on the finish, definitely long and smooth. I get a little bit of that butterscotch right on the kind of the midsection of my tongue. And then it does go to that cinnamon on the finish, right? When you swallow, it's very slight and it's quick, but I do get that butterscotch. That's really weird.
This is definitely like don't judge this bourbon by the first sip. We say that a lot. This is one that as you drink it, you start to pick shit up with this specific bourbon. I think for me, if you poured me this neat, the first couple sips, I'd be like, it's not really my kind of bourbon, like personally, that's not my style. But as I'm drinking it more, as I'm getting towards the end of my Glencairn here on the first dram, it's getting better. It's getting better. I'm picking up more of those notes. Definitely tasting a lot more cherry. I can't pinpoint the cinnamon or the butterscotch, but like I'm definitely catching those spice notes in the back, and I like that. Like that's something I like. And I'm starting to get more of those notes of like cherry as I keep sipping on this.
Same.
So I'm hitting some cherry, and I'm hitting some spice, and that's making me be like, yeah, I could fuck with Four Roses, right? Like this is a decent little dram right here.
And looking at the aging on Four Roses single barrel OESO, we have typically about 8 to 10 years is what they put on the label.
Fuck.
Yeah, it could be more, but ultimately it has to be at least 8 years. Again, anytime a bourbon signifies a specific year amount, that means that if they do blend it, for instance, if it's an 8-year bourbon, they could have a 12-year, a 10-year, a 13-year, but every bourbon has to be at least aged 8 years within that blend. So with this, it's typically aged for about 8 to 10 years. And then on the mash bill, we're looking at 75% corn, 20% rye, and 5% malted barley, just like what we spoke about, which makes up the exact mash bill for OESO. All right, Ryan. So that was a pretty good pour. I think we can both agree, correct?
Yeah, it was okay.
We wrote it out.
It was a very spicy meatball. If you like a spicy cherry, I think the OESO?
Correct.
Four Roses, that's your jam right there. A little bit of fruit, a little bit of vanilla, a lot of spice, a lot of heat. It was a decent pour.
Awesome. Well, are you ready to take off the training wheels? Step it up to the big boys club?
Oh, born ready.
All right, so we're moving on from the single barrel, and we are moving on to the single barrel strength. So this one, we're looking at 110 proof. Again, this is a store pick from Top 10 Liquors, St. Louis Park. And this one specifically, what kind of separates the two is this one is uncut. It's a barrel strength uncut. Again, that means straight from the barrel, no water added, right? So you take a drill it into the side of a barrel, into that stave, pull it out, juice pours out. That's exactly what you're drinking, right?
Love it.
Awesome. So let's dive into the tasting notes. It should be fairly similar, but we'll see.
Let's do it. Start with the nose.
The nose. Right away, the aromas are definitely hitting a little bit more.
Chocolate. Is there chocolate notes?
Yep, more malty.
Vanilla.
Yep. I get that vanilla, that malt, almost that chocolate with a dark fruit.
Smells delicious, honestly.
Truly, when I think of this, I love something that smells fantastic on the nose. I'm like, wow, this is the profile that I love. And then as soon as we go from the nose to the palate, I truly think this is the moment of truth, because a lot of times I'm disappointed.
Yeah.
But sometimes I'm like, holy shit, I had no idea.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
The nose and the palate do not agree all the time. And it's very interesting. It's like you get the nose and you're like, for this bourbon right now, we're both kind of excited. We're both getting notes that we want in a bourbon.
Yeah.
And the moment of truth. I like that. That could be a new tagline, right? The moment of truth. And you
Moment
take
of truth.
the taste.
Yeah,
Because you could be setting yourself up to be let down.
Exactly. Every time.
Let's do it. Get more of the sweetness on this one at the top of the tongue, which I really like, and then it kicks in that spice in the back. I'm trying to hit those chocolate notes though. I don't know if I'm catching them. I definitely caught them on the nose here and there. Are you catching them on the palate?
Yeah, to me it's like honey oak on the front, and then as it moves back, it's a quick like malt with some dark fruits or cherries, and then it's just heat.
Yeah,
and spice.
But a good pour.
I like this one for sure better than the just regular single barrel.
Me too.
I almost think it's just as hot at 110 proof. Plus, I think just the overall finish is a little bit longer, a little bit more full bodied, and I'm definitely getting the malty notes of chocolate that I do enjoy. I don't like too much. I wish the cherry would show through a little bit more, but I still get hints of like that malty, dark fruit, and then honey on the front of the tongue with a long finish, and it still kind of stays on my tongue, for roughly 10 to 15 seconds. I can still taste it. So,
oh my God. I don't know if that was like the fourth or fifth sip, but
you liking it more?
Yeah.
Same.
That was tremendous.
Same.
Like, as you go, that's a 4. Is that a 4 rose? Like you said that coming in. I'm just going to say it. That's a 4 roses thing. That's our conclusion.
Yeah.
We're not savants. You're closer than me. Trust me.
Not by much.
For sure. But like 4 roses, you gotta get into it, right? Like you gotta sip on it for a little while. Like definitely don't judge it on the first sip. Give yourself some time. Keep sipping it. Even if it's not your favorite, the first 3 sips, keep going, because by the 4th or 5th sip, holy shit! Like you started hitting those notes. Like I just hit them all. Like I just got all the sweetness and everything I wanted.
Yeah.
And on a swig.
Totally agree. So when it comes to the aging, we're typically looking at around 9 to 11 years. This specific store pick from Top 10 Liquors has been aged 9 years and 7 months. And then moving on to the mash bill, we're looking at, again, that 75% corn, 20% rye, and 5% malted barley.
Man, I'm just going to say, this shit's aggressive. Like 4 roses with their different recipes and how long they're aging these bourbons. Like this is a process, man. It's impressive. Like my mind's a little blown right now with like the different bourbons they put out, the different recipes, how long these age. Like typically we're talking about a 6-year aging, right? Typically for bourbons we typically talk about on the pod.
4 to 6 to 8, yeah.
This one's just casually 9 to 11 years.
Right. And then finally wrapping it up with the mash bill, we're looking at 75% corn, 20% rye, and 5% malted barley. Moving on to the E5 scale. Let's kick it off. Daily Dram. And again, we're covering 2 different bourbons, 4 Roses single barrel and the 4 Roses single barrel strength. So, Ryan, what do you think for the Daily Dram?
Daily Dram, pass.
So I don't think either of these is really a Daily Dram. I understand the OESO single barrel is going to be hitting shelves, so you'll be able to get it quite frequently, but it's still something that, damn, it's so hot right up front. It's not something that I think I can just polish off every night, if that was my thing.
No, I agree with that.
So I definitely would not put it in the daily dram category. It is at that around $50 to $60 price point. Another thing that kind of takes it out of this specific category as well, but I'll move on to the next. Fair?
Fair.
Awesome. Impress my guests.
Pass. I don't think this is an impress my guest. I don't think either of these bourbons really fall into that bucket. You might be able to impress your guests with like the story of the guy wooing the gal, Paul, right?
Yeah.
What was his name? Paul. He's wooing the gal and naming his future brand Four Roses. Maybe that would impress him, but I don't think the actual bourbon itself, the bottle itself, would really impress your guests, right? I just don't think it falls into that bucket personally. But do you agree?
100%.
Yeah. I'm going to skip ahead, actually. Can we eliminate Precious Pour?
Yes.
Yep.
Honestly, before the tasting, I thought that the single barrel strength, the 110 proof, was going to fall into this category.
You thought it was going to be a Precious?
I did. I haven't had it for like 3 years, if I'm being honest.
Okay.
And I thought it was pretty good back then, but now that we've had the opportunity to try both of these, my final pick is going to be Saturday Night Sipper, the Four Roses single barrel strength at 110.2 proof.
Agreed.
The 100 proof is going to go into the budget blend. And the reason I say that is because I circle back and think too, if I'm hosting a party and I have some of my boys over, typically it's my cousins, 3 hooks, I'm thinking of like, what kind of Manhattan can I make them? Like guys that drink bourbon neat or with an ice cube or with a dash of water. I think this is absolutely perfect for it because it's a little bit higher proof at that 100 proof. So the bourbon will shine through a little bit more, especially in like a Manhattan. I make them a little bit more stiff. So you're going to have typically 3 parts to 1 part vermouth versus bourbon and then a couple dashes.
I've had your Manhattans and I blacked out.
Exactly.
So,
I mean,
yes.
you got to let the cube just melt a little bit.
There was no
Just a
melting.
little hair.
Yeah, there's no melting.
No.
There might have been hair. Probably
from me.
hair.
I've got plenty.
There's hair on the chest, but no melting. It was melting into the couch, maybe. That's all. Like body bag.
Straight up marshmallow.
You gave me Manhattan nightcap at like 2 a.m. once, and
okay,
body bag.
To be fair, that was at your place,
Yes.
and that was $17.92.
Yeah, it was the 125.
Black label.
No, it's the 125,
Yeah.
$17.92.
Terrible
And
idea.
you
That's my
deci-
fault.
You
That's
decided
my
to
fault.
nightcap it with that in the Manhattan.
I mean, technically, it is a nightcap, so you're welcome that you fell asleep, aka passed out, because you can't handle and you can't hang.
No, somehow I got up the stairs. I don't know how. Thankfully, I was in my own house. That's the best part.
That's a win.
And I appreciate that.
That's a win.
You came over with your Manhattan ingredients.
I did.
You brought them over from your home.
I brought the whole shebang.
Yeah. It was pretty sweet.
But that is my favorite thing is I would call this a budget blend. It depends on the crowd. This is something that, again, I could pour myself as I'm making typically 3 to 4 Manhattans at a time. I'm going to have 3 or 4 swigs at least, right? So I'm going to burn that palate. I'm going to start tasting those notes. I am going to enjoy it, right? But ultimately, this is the bourbon that is going to go great in a Manhattan or old fashioned for my guests that do drink bourbon, which most of my friends do. And then I can also enjoy it on the side. So I'm going to finalize my answer. I'm going to click it in. Budget blend.
All right, folks, that's a wrap. And remember, life's too short for bad bourbon. And as the Budman would say, yo, the chicken just took my bourbon.
And hey, Ryan.
Yes, Sika.
If you didn't learn anything from today, at least you have an excuse to pour another drink. For research, of course, right?
Oh, absolutely. Cheers.
Cheers.